Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first hearing of the House Committee on Higher Education and Technology. Welcome all of you for participating, both members and testifiers alike. We're meeting on a very auspicious date and time. It's, of course, the year 2022, and it's, so anyway, it's 2/22 at 2. So congratulations, all of us, for being here in this year of the tiger. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chair Linda Smith to go over the ground rules as we conduct this hearing via Zoom.
Thank you, Chair. It's Linda Clark.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. In order to allow as many people to testify as possible, there will be a 2-minute time limit per testifier. Please keep yourself muted and your video off while waiting to testify and after your testimony is complete. The Zoom chat function will allow you to chat with the technical staff only. Please use the chat only for technical issues. If you are disconnected unexpectedly, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting. If disconnected while presenting testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. Please note the House is not responsible for any bad internet connections on the testifier's end. In the event of a network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or schedule a meeting for decision-making. In that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. Please avoid using any trademarked or copyrighted images. Please refrain from profanity or uncivil behavior. Such behavior may be grounds for removal from the hearing without the ability to rejoin.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I want to thank Vice Chair Clark because, and I apologize. I got the Linda part right because that also happens to be my wife's name, but I apologize. And incidentally, I wanted to mention that this is not only Vice Chair Clark's first hearing, it's also her first session as a member of the State House as an appointee for the Maui seat. So thank you all. As she mentioned, we have a number of testifiers before us. There is a 2-minute limit that we ask all the testifiers to abide by. I know that on a number of these bills, there is much passion, but I'm going to ask that you combine your passion with brevity. And we have an alarm that will sound at 2 p.m., 2 minutes, and I'm going to ask you to respect that time. So first up, we have House Bill 1531, establishing a collective bargaining unit for graduate assistants employed by the University of Hawaii. And first up, we have from the State Office of Collective Bargaining, Director Riker Wada. Not present, written testimony. We have Craig Hirai, Department of Budget and Finance, offering comments. And then Randy Pereira from the Hawaii Government Employees Association.
Good afternoon, Chair. Welcome, Vice Chair, and aloha to the members of the committee. Michelle Kurihara-Klein on behalf of Randy Pereira, our Executive Director, and the membership at the Hawaii Government Employees Association. We stand on our written testimony in support of this measure, and I'll be available to answer any questions that Chair, Vice Chair, or any of the members may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next up from the Hawaii State Teachers Association. No one? Okay. Testimony in support. Next, we have Democratic Party of Hawaii Education Caucus, Chris Schofield. Not present. In support, John Wittek, Hawaii Workers Center. In support. From Unite Here, Local 5, Cade Watanabe. In support. Academic Labor United, Kahala Johnson. In support. Okay, you know, at this point, I have more than 100 testifiers, all of them in support. And so I'm going to ask if there's anyone participating in this Zoom call who have not called yet but who has submitted testimony and who wishes to testify. And I see, okay, I'm going to start at the top of my screen. Casey Brinkman.
Aloha, Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and committee members. Thank you so much for this opportunity to testify. My name is Casey Brinkman. I live in Honolulu. I'm a graduate assistant at the University of Hawaii in the Institute for Astronomy, and I'm a member of Academic Labor United. I'm testifying today in strong support of HB 1531. Two of the first things I noticed upon arriving at the University of Hawaii is the large disparity in pay between departments and our lack of ability to negotiate for better contracts. As a member of one of the higher paid departments, I receive a living wage, but I've spent years watching my peers in other departments struggle to get by, many being paid as little as half as what I do. I've met students who live in their offices or their cars because their department is capable of effectively paying them less than minimum wage, something that we know is not even a living wage here in Hawaii. I love attending the University of Hawaii, but I am sick of seeing UH profit, both in terms of money and recognition, off the backs of graduate assistants. I'm sick of me and my peers bringing renown to this university through prestigious fellowships, through our publications and press release-worthy research, and through our laborers as teachers that keeps the undergraduate program afloat. We do all this only for our university to deny our basic rights to collective bargaining by pretending that what we do is not labor worthy of formal recognition. If graduate assistants are granted the right to collective bargaining through this bill, I can help advocate for my peers to receive a living wage, nothing luxurious, just the ability to afford housing and food security. I can help advocate for safe working conditions for my peers. If we're granted the right to collective bargaining with this bill, we can secure the same working conditions that folks in most other institutions take for granted. We need the ability to advocate for ourselves because we are not just students, we are workers and public employees who deserve the same rights to collective bargaining as other public employees. Please pass Bill HB 1531. Thank you. I yield my
Mahalo,
time.
Casey. Alex Miller.
Aloha, Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and committee members. Thank you so much for the opportunity again to testify. I am delivering the testimony on behalf of the organization of Academic Labor United. I'm currently the chairperson of Academic Labor United. I'm also a graduate assistant at the Center on Disability Studies at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I live in Honolulu and Kaimuki as well. We submitted our testimony and we want to stand on that testimony, but also I want to highlight a couple points here. So LU has been working to organize graduate assistants at UH for unionization for 5 years, but we're building on 5 decades of advocacy by many, many graduate assistants for the right to collective bargaining. We include graduate assistants at both UH Manoa and Hilo, as you will hear today, and this bill would create a new collective bargaining unit for graduate assistants at UH. This means that if passed, GAs would then legally have the option to collectively join a union if they so choose, and that our employer, UH and the state, would then be legally obligated to engage in Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 89 collective bargaining through our union, a right that all private workers and most public sector workers in the state already have, including other instructional and research workers at the university who do similar work to us. Our written testimony and that of many of the GAs that you'll hear today and have testified for many years in the past outline some of the workplace issues that GAs deal with as examples of some of the issues that could be resolved and have been resolved in other unions through the collective bargaining process, and to demonstrate that for years, despite promises otherwise, university administration has failed to address these issues through administrative policy. However, I want to say that the particulars of what may or may not be included as bargaining items in prospective future negotiations are not what is before this committee today or before this legislative body. HB 1531 includes no appropriations for increased wages or any other cost items. This bill is simply asking one question: that legislators, following Article 13, Section 2 of the Hawaii State Constitution, recognize our right as workers to collectively bargain with our employer. I would also like to note that graduate assistants' right to collective bargaining is recognized both by the National Labor Relations Board and by 18 other states, including UH Manoa peer and benchmark institutions at the universities of California, Washington, Oregon State, Iowa, South Florida, and New Mexico, as well as UH Hilo peer and benchmark institutions at California State and the State University of New York. So to close, We have been organizing for collective bargaining because it is not only our right, but we believe it is our best option to address the concerns and hardships facing GAs as workers at UH, and we think that is demonstrated by the years of inefficiency and inaction by UH administration. We are closer than ever to winning recognition of these rights, and we think that this is our year. Thank you. I'm available for questions as well.
Thank you, Alex. Shirley Gabber.
Aloha, Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Shirley Gabber. I live in Honolulu, and I'm a graduate assistant in the linguistics department at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I am testifying today in strong support of Bill HB 1531. A union would greatly benefit myself and my coworkers, giving us the opportunity for collective bargaining, particularly around the issues of wages and sick leave. The wages that we currently receive are so low, especially compared to the cost of living in Honolulu, that a large number of my coworkers receive food stamps. Many of us who don't receive food stamps, such as myself, are working additional jobs on top of a 20-hour-a-week graduate assistantship and full-time graduate study. Additionally, we're not guaranteed any sick leave, even for those of us who are teaching in person during the ongoing pandemic. Without a union, we don't have any way of addressing these issues. I therefore strongly support Bill HB 1531, and I implore you to pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Next up, Kavena Kapahua.
Aloha, Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and committee members. Mahalo for this opportunity to testify. My name is Kavena Ulo Kala Kapahua. I'm from Kailua, and I'm a graduate assistant at the University of Hawaii at Manoa for the Native Hawaiian Student Services Office. I'm testifying in strong support of HB 1531. I'm a member of Academic Labor United, the Graduate Assistant Student Union, and I strongly support this bill to finally, after decades, empower graduate assistants at UH to exercise our constitutional rights that have been denied to us as public employees. Graduate assistants have spent the past several decades underpaid, underprotected, and underpowered. The right to collectively bargain is the greatest right that we as workers have to ensure our rights are respected, to ensure we receive fair pay for our work, and to receive the respect we deserve in the workplace. Graduate assistants have been without this basic right for decades now. The right to collectively bargain would offer us the chance to finally receive many of the basic necessities we need for life. Being unable to collectively bargain means that we have not received a living wage, despite the rising cost of living in Hawaii, forcing many of us to seek food assistance just to put food on the table or make rent. We have not been able to receive sick leave, despite the fact we're in a deadly global pandemic. If I were to try and list to you the numerous graduate assistants I know who have contracted COVID and then were forced to continue working despite their symptoms due to not having sick leave, it would take up my entire testimony. Graduate assistants make UH run. Without our labor, the university would not have been able to transition to online courses due to COVID. It would not have been able to transition them back to in-person. It would not get critical administrative work done, nor would much of the university's research get accomplished. Graduate assistants teach a massive proportion of the classes offered at UH, including classes that are required for graduation. Our role at UH ensures proper education for the next generation of community members and leaders, and yet we, as those critical public employees, have been unable to exercise our constitutional right to collectively bargain. Without us, UH, and by extension, the state of Hawaii, would not be able to properly offer a college education to our students. This is the chance for the legislature to correct a decades-long suppression of our rights. This is the chance for this body to finally give justice to thousands of graduate assistants who have been unable to support themselves, to put food on the table, to go to the doctor, or any other basic necessities. Do not miss this opportunity. Pass this bill.
Mahalo. Shuchitra Narayanan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Aloha, Chair Takayama and Vice Chair Clark and committee members. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify. My name is Suchitra Narayanan, and I live in Honolulu, and I'm a graduate student at the Institute for Astronomy at University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm a member of Academic Labor United, and I'm testifying today in strong support of HB 1531. My entire graduate career thus far has been in this pandemic. I started my PhD in the fall of 2020, and I have seen firsthand how UH cares more about my productivity than my health. As an immunocompromised individual and the sole caretaker of my parents, who are also immunocompromised, I had to advocate for my being remote for my first year because all of my classes were online. Instead, I was either forced to either come to Island, risking my health and leaving my parents, or have to take a leave of absence. Being nearly forced to leave my job before I was even an official student was just the beginning of the lack of care UH had for me. Continually, I've had to advocate for myself, most recently when I got COVID-19 a few weeks ago. I was sick and unable to breathe the first week of classes. However, I was expected to work because we don't have sick leave, even as we're approaching the third year of this pandemic. My story isn't unique. Graduate assistants have had to choose between their livelihood and their life for the past 2 years. If we had the right to collectively bargain, I, along with my fellow graduate assistants, would be in a much better position to advocate for ourselves and our life without fear of retaliation. The University of Hawaii works because we graduate students do. Without our labor, UH could not run. Like all workers, we deserve to be treated with dignity and respect for our life. Please pass HB 1531 so that graduate students can exercise their state constitutional right to collective bargaining. Thank you.
Thank you. Kyle Hart.
Hi, aloha mai, Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and committee members. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify in front of you today. My name is Kyle Hart. I am currently a resident of Hawaii and Kapalama, Ahupua'a. I have been a graduate teaching assistant in Kamakuko Kalani Center for Hawaiian Studies at University of Hawaii at Manoa since the beginning of my graduate school career in fall 2021. During my undergraduate years at Honolulu Community College in UH Manoa, I was fortunate enough to utilize my GI Bill. That untaxed stipend that I took home was typically close to $3,200 a month, depending on adjustments. This allowed me to focus 100% on my schooling and would take advantage that would otherwise this allowed me to focus 100% on my schooling and take advantage of critical professional development opportunities that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to participate in. As of spring 2022, my take-home pay is $1,191 after taxes and healthcare per month from my GTA position. This doesn't even pay my rent. Now I'm relegated to working odd jobs that are completely unrelated to my academic pursuits solely because they're willing to work around my school and my GTA schedules. One job within the UH academic system as a full-time graduate student should at least provide us with food and shelter. As a full-time student, a GTA, and a part-time employee, I easily exceed 80 hours of work a week. For the first time in my life as a veteran, I am now eligible for WIC food assistance. I am testifying today in strong support of HB 1531, and on behalf of all my peers working as GAs, I humbly ask all of you to support it as well in an effort to support future generations of wise leaders. Mahalo.
Thank you. Jun Shin.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jun Shin. I am a senior at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, testifying today in strong support of House Bill, the House Bill 1531. Thank you. Yeah. I just wanted to just offer strong support as an undergrad here at UH because during my 4 years at UH, I have had the privilege of being taught by some amazing grad students here in the university. They have been some of my most favorite instructors, and they bring so much passion and dedication to the classroom that that is so important for students like me in our education. And I just wanted to come today to stand in support with folks who have been such important support systems in my education. So please pass this bill. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. I will take a flying attempt at this name. Natalie Iroquois. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair Takayama, Vice Chair, and committee members. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Natalie Iroquois. I am originally from Canada, but I now live in Hilo, Hawaii. I am a graduate assistant in the College of Natural and Health Sciences at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. I am testifying today in strong support of HB 1531. Unions are important for employees because they provide job security and justice for their members. When I lived in Canada, I worked as a microbiology lab tech for a company that was unionized. A few months after I had first started, my manager physically attacked me. If it weren't for my union representatives, my employment would have been terminated after the report I made on my manager. My union helped me keep my position filed a complaint against my manager, and received disability. I am very grateful and want to be able to have the opportunity to help as a union representative one day. I am fairly certain that no faculty at UH Hilo would ever try to hurt one of us, but I think it's worth noting, as students, we are more vulnerable and at a higher risk for sexual and physical assault. Unions will provide us with safety, comfort, and legal help that will help us to all do our jobs more confidently. Unions are like an older brother who are always there watching over us and have your back no matter what. I am in strong support of HB 1531. Mahalo for listening.
Thank you, Natalie. And now I must apologize to both you and Representative Clark for messing up your last names. I don't see anyone else with their hands up. Is there anyone else on the Zoom call who wishes to testify on House Bill 1531? Seeing none, we'll open it up to questions from the members. Members, any questions? Representative Capella.
I have a question for Alu. Mr. Miller, if you're still there. So as you expressed in your testimony, this is not a new issue. This has been something you folks have come back to the legislature year after year about. And no one has testified about it today, but in the past, there have been grad assistant members who have testified about either sexual harassment or sexual assault. And I was wondering if you've had any discussions and if the university has held good faith discussions with grad assistants, with ALU about issues like this and about issues of workplace retaliation from supervisors relating to sexual harassment or sexual assault on campus.
Yeah, so to speak, thank you for the question, Rep. Capella. To speak to your first point, yes, it is true. Graduate assistants or graduate students, I should say, because the so every 2 years, for 2 years, for 4 years, but biannually, the university has done reports on campus climate around sexual harassment and assault and abuse. And both reports, both in 2017 and in 2019, have noted, and this is in our testimony, you can find some of this information, but have noted that graduate students are at higher risk for experiencing sexual harassment at campus than any other classification of students, and particularly at UH Manoa, where the vast majority of graduate assistants live and work, and we are also at a higher percentage or a higher rate of experiencing that kind of harassment from our supervisors or bosses. To give a really horrifying statistic, at the last report in 2019, every other, so 1 in 2 queer graduate students reported experiencing sexual harassment at the University of Hawaii. So transgender and gender non-binary identifying students, and 1 in 4 women. So yeah, just to lay that out, that is the case. And although my comrade Natalie noted that you would hope that, of course, none of our advisors would abuse or harass one of us, that is not the case. Graduate assistants do experience those things in the workplace. To answer the second point of your question, whether university has worked with us, the university administration has never acknowledged the Academic Labor United as a group of workers who are advocating for workplace issues. They've never communicated with us. They've never responded to any of our inquiries. They do work with the graduate student organization on occasion to, in their words, make things better around certain workplace issues, but those almost never materialize. For instance, they've been quote, working on a sick leave policy for graduate assistants for 2 years. That still isn't here. So to answer your question, no, they claim that they do, but between the 2017 report and the 2019 report, the numbers didn't get better. If anything, more students were reporting experiencing sexual harassment and assault on campus. And I want to note also that report, they're only doing that because they were mandated to. There was a clear problem on the campus, and they were required to do that report. So yeah, I think that was everything. If I didn't cover your question, please ask me again.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing those statistics. And I think you highlighted more reasons as to why this bill is so important.
Any other questions, members? Seeing none, I just want to let the testifiers know that our committee will be voting at the conclusion of this hearing. But I recognize that as grad students, you may have other responsibilities. So I'll just let you know ahead of time that it'll be my recommendation that we move this bill forward. So thank you all. We'll move on to the next bill, House Bill 2015, relating to the University of Hawaii and establishing Ho'okaulike, a criminal legal system institute for the Richardson School of Law. And first up, we have Craig Hirai, Department of Budget and Finance, offering comments. Next, we have Camille Nelson, Dean of the Richardson School of Law. She was just there. Dean Nelson, please proceed. I think you're muted. I'm sorry, Dean Nelson, we can't seem to be hearing you.
Oh, is this better?
That is excellent.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. I apologize and appreciate the tech support person who was unmuting me. So good afternoon and greetings to you, Chair, greetings to you, Vice Chair, and greetings to the entire committee. I support what I've shared in my written testimony, and I wish to emphasize just a few points. Now is the time to breathe life into a criminal legal system institute for restoration and healing at the University of Hawaii. Ho'okaulike is much needed in this state at this time. We already have the studies, we already have the information, we already have the data calling for its creation. We know that Hawaii has significant criminal legal system challenges that lead to mass incarceration. Indeed, Hawaii's rate of incarceration is one of the highest in the democratic world. We know that these high levels of incarceration and criminal system involvement are even more disturbing when broken down by race. People of color, especially Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islander, and Black people are overrepresented in this state's criminal legal system. We know that the compounding effects of these disparities take a cumulative toll on Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and other communities of colors. We also know these effects become intergenerational and prove traumatic to families and communities. Moreover, there exists a social web of societal challenges and problems that often feed into and fuel the criminal legal system. We know these societal challenges are particularly devastating to low-income families and communities of color. We further know that there are many social issues percolating just beneath the surface of many criminal justice matters. We need to more intentionally incorporate community insights and community wisdom in meaningful ways that acknowledge that we must do better. We know that to solve these long-standing and persistent problems, we need comprehensive, inclusive, interdisciplinary approaches. Yet, we continue to treat the wounds instead of prevent the cuts. Ho'okaulike offers such a holistic and preventative approach, one that is proactive and that connects these interdisciplinary dots by recognizing the social problems supplying people into the criminal justice system. The Criminal Legal System Institute for Restoration and Healing would recognize the cyclical nature of these problems as they are interwoven with social determinants of health, including economic instability, access to quality education, access to quality healthcare, neighborhood context and built environments, social and community supports and contexts. Through this initiative, we would all work for a more holistic and comprehensive response that would improve outcomes, that would better support those impacted by the criminal legal system and their families, and that would engage and support and, importantly, uplift communities. through Ho'okalike, the state and the University of Hawaii would become leaders in not just the crucial conversations, but in achieving better outcomes for already impacted people and for those at risk of becoming involved with the criminal legal system. In sum, we are fortunate to have the desire and the passion to do better, and we are also fortunate to have the humility to know that we can and must do better. Thank you for your consideration. I appreciate it, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Dean Nelson. Next up, we have Jonathan Osorio, Hawai'i Nui Akea of UH Manoa.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Aloha Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and members of the House Higher Education and Technology Committee. My name is Jonathan Osorio, the Dean of Hawai'i Nui Akea School of Hawaiian Knowledge at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. I have submitted testimony in support of HB 2015, and I stand by that testimony. I'm willing to answer any questions from this committee. And I also want to indicate that Dean Nelson did a great job basically of summarizing this. But I will say just briefly, the horrific socioeconomic conditions of Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders in Hawaii stems from a long history of exploitation, introduction of disease, and outright imperialism over several centuries. The poverty in our communities today is extended by a criminal justice system that treats Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders differently and more aggressively than it treats others. Reform of the system, I believe, cannot take place without improving the ability of our affected populations to manage the conflicts with law enforcement, with better infrastructure and services, including education, healthcare, community centers, job training, counseling. The purpose of Ho'okalike is to create an institute at UH that will foster and assist the development of these activities in affected neighborhoods. And Hawai'i Nui Akea is fully committed to this project and will be working with the law school to put this forward. I also want to say just at this point that it is absolutely true that graduate students make this university run. And they are part of the ask that we are making to create this institute. I don't have any other comments to make. I'm also willing to answer any questions the committee would like to pose. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Next up, we have Kylie Akiona in support. Jamaica Osorio in support. Testimony from Sarah Perry in opposition. And last testimony is from Kathy Shar in support. I don't see anyone else who wishes to testify. So at this point, let's open it up to questions from members. Members? Representative Ganadin.
To Dean Nelson. Thank you so much for testifying before the committee and for being present here today. I know how busy you are during the school year. Can you tell us how the creation of this institute is going to be different from, say, an adjunct professor coming in to teach advanced criminal law or kind of what has been happening at the university over the last several years, in which usually criminal law professors teach some of the ways that our criminal laws intersect with, as you say, the social determinants of health. How will this school be different from that?
Thanks for the question, Representative Ganadin. I think the promise that this institute holds is to, as I said, put the pieces together and connect the dots. Typically, we deal with subject matter somewhat atomistically, just as a sliver. And I think what we fail to do in many spaces is to bring the pieces together in a way that allows for the possibility of true transformation. Because I think one of the ways in which we have a little bit of conceit is by thinking we can do this alone, and no discipline can fix these persistent problems with their historical rooting alone. So I think this creates space for conversations that we don't have because we don't have time in a traditional accreditation focused curriculum to build a syllabus that is trying to solve societal problems. We're often in a space where we're creating syllabi consistent with, you know, additional overlays of compliance at accreditation levels. This also allows for something very special about Hawaii to take place, which is, as Dean Osorio mentioned, the connection to community. That is not always a part of a syllabus. And we have the chance to connect not just to community engagement, but to a very unique set of understandings and knowledge and wisdom here in this state to deal with the challenges of this state. So it's not importing solutions, but harnessing the existing power base and knowledge base that already exists here and connecting it to the doctrine and the understandings that we have at the university to do better by this state.
Thank you so much, Dean.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Seeing none, Vice Chair? No. Seeing none, I'd like to ask Dr. Osorio a point of clarification. In your written testimony, you noted that the Prison Policy Initiative states that Hawaii has an incarceration rate of 439 per 100,000 people. And Dean Nelson as well noted that Hawaii has among the highest incarceration rates in the world. I read that study, and to put it in perspective, the rate that was cited places Hawaii in the lower 20% of states as far as incarceration rates. In other words, 40 other states have higher incarceration rates than we do. So in a manner of speaking, we do comparably well compared to other states, but as a country, we're abysmal. So am I wrong in interpreting it?
I think that's a fair interpretation. It's just that when you're comparing, they're not just talking about other states, they're talking about democracies. So the fact is that the United States as a country is horrific in terms of incarcerating people, and particularly people of color. Those kinds of statistics extend across the country. As a part of that country, I would submit that we would not want to be 20th. Is that how you put it? I mean, we would want 40th, to be much better than that as the state in the United States.
Understood. Thank you very much, Doctor. Seeing no other questions, let's.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Representative Gannon.
Can I do a follow-up with Dean Osorio?
Oh, Leah, please proceed.
Okay. Just following up with Dean Osorio. There's at the University of Hawaii or anywhere else in Hawaii, there's not really, to correct me if I'm wrong, there's not really an institute that develops best practices for dealing with indigenous peoples in criminal justice. Is that right?
That's absolutely true, and that was something that we discovered, last year when we were looking at a Kellogg grant. That there isn't anything like this, and its absence seems really, really striking to us because the problem is fairly pervasive and it's a statewide concern.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Let's move on to the next bill, which is House Bill 2186 relating to university districts, allowing the UH system to set up, to designate its campuses as university districts, subject to certain rules and regulations. And let's see, first up, we have Calbert Young, Vice President, University of Hawaii.
Good afternoon, Chair, members. This is Calbert. University of Hawaii has submitted testimony in support of this measure. I did want to highlight that this measure represents a similar measure that was submitted last session, but taken from some of the inputs during last session from a number of the counties. In the interim, the University of Hawaii has worked It was a series of meetings with all of the counties, including the State Office of Planning, to refine a bill that I think represents a more collaborative approach to identify those issues in order to create legislation that would still be achievable for goals for the university in the terms of the planning and entitlement process, but still represents a workable framework for all of the county home rule interests. And so with that, happy to stand on our testimony and support and available for any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We also have testimony from the City and County of Honolulu Department of Planning and Permitting in opposition. I don't see them on the Zoom call, but basically they are opposed because they say that such a proposal would conflict with the city's transit-oriented development zones. And so if there's anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 2186, please raise your hand. Seeing none, members, any questions? Okay, let's move on to the next bill, which is House Bill 2187 relating to changing the terms of University of Hawaii Board of Regents to, well, changing the terms to make them more consistent. And we have Executive Administrator and Secretary to the Board of Regents, Kendra Oishi.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and members of the committee. I'm Kendra Oishi, Executive Administrator and Secretary of the Board of Regents. Chair, I'd just like to thank you for hearing this bill, which was introduced at the request of the Board of Regents and is part of the Governor's Administration bill package. I'll keep it real quick. So in 2019, a bill was enacted that reduced the number of regents, which resulted in an uneven number of member terms ending each year. So this bill is sort of a kind of a housekeeping measure so that we can hopefully get the terms realigned so that an even number of terms end each year. And thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. That's all the testifiers we have. Members, any questions for Kendra? Seeing none, I have a question for you, Kendra. It's my understanding that the term of a Board of Regent is 5 years, correct?
Correct.
And is there a limitation on the number of terms such a regent may be appointed to?
A regent can serve up to 2 consecutive 5-year terms.
Okay. So in your proposal, for example, a regent whose 5-year term expires this year might be subject to a 2-year appointment. So as opposed to 5 years. Would this, in other words, limit that regent to a maximum service of 7 years as opposed to 10 under the current system?
I would need to take a closer look at the language, but I don't believe so because I believe it's worded to say that it's 2 consecutive, basically the full 5-year term. So as an example, we have had regents that were appointed in the middle of a term. So let's say, maybe a regent stepped down in their 3rd year. So we have had situations where a regent was appointed to fill the remaining 2 years of, that member's term, and they are still eligible for another 2 full 5 years. So since we didn't touch any of the other language, I would think that would apply, but I didn't specifically ask that question when we ran this through.
All right. Not to get too complicated, but if that 2-year term regent were to expire as it would expire after 2 years and was reappointed to yet another term to fill out the 5 years, wouldn't that put you back in the same problem you have now? I mean, you would then have an unequal number of regents leaving every year.
Well, our intent was in the, I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question, but in
Well, I
the,
guess what I'm saying is that the intent, as I heard you say, is
Mhm.
that we not reduce the maximum tenures that a region could serve. And so if you're doing so by limiting a region after 5 years to 2 years, then that region would have only served 7 years. And your fix would be, I think I heard you say, well, the region could be reappointed to a third term, but then that would not fix your original problem.
well, if that regent were appointed to a third term, it would be a full 5-year term.
Oh,
So basically I know I'm probably not gonna explain this right, but
so that
basically
person could serve 12 years then.
exactly, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it is, I mean, it's actually possible now the way that the current language is worded, because it says that the regents can serve up to 2 consecutive 5-year terms. So like I said, I believe we have had situations where a regent has actually served more than 10 years because they were fulfilling the remainder of a term of someone who had left the board.
Okay, thank you. No, I intend to move the bill. It's just that in the HRS, it doesn't specify that there's a limitation on either terms or years of service.
Yeah, it
So-
might be in another it might be in another chapter. I have to look into, but I'll shoot you a note.
Yeah, so that may come up in future committees, just to make you aware.
Okay. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, let's move on to the next bill, which is House Bill 2397, establishing a Hawaii Broadband Infrastructure Authority. And we have a number of testifiers. First up, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs.
Aloha Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and members of the committee. I'm Catherine Awakuni Cologne, the Director of the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. In the interest of time, I will stand on the department's comments, wherein we offer concerns around the lack of positions and funding for this important initiative. It's just a one-time funding, and I'll be available for any questions that you may have. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Director. State Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism. Ebed. We have their, I'm sorry. We'll move on to Department of Budget and Finance, offering comments. University of Hawaii, Garrett Yoshimi.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, representing the University of Hawaii and the state's broadband interest. Submitted testimony supporting the intent of House Bill 2397. I did want to highlight one of the concerns in terms of the timing of the rules to be issued by federal agencies that are providing the majority of the funds to support these initiatives. Unfortunately, the timing is going to be probably the summer or later. So just some concern in terms of potential conflicts because we are uncertain of those rules at this time. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Garrett. Let's see, Office of Information Practices, Cheryl Kakazu Park. Offering comments. Let's see, State Council on Developmental Disabilities. In support. State Department of Transportation.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Patrick McCain. The Department of Transportation is in support of the measure and we will stand on our testimony. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Patrick. Let's see, Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, Office of Community Services. In support. State Council on, oh, I'm sorry, I called that. CTIA. Trade industry representative in opposition. Charter Communications. Not present, but offering comments.
Good afternoon, Chair.
I'm sorry, yep. Oh, Charter Communication, okay.
Yeah,
Please
sorry
proceed.
about that. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Lieberman. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Charter Communications here in Hawaii. Charter stands on our written comments and is available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Cliff Miyake, Ocean Networks.
Good afternoon, Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and members of the committee. Ocean Networks, Cliff Miyake, Vice President, Business Development for Ocean Networks. We stand on our support for this bill. However, I'd like to comment on the language referencing trans-Pacific cables and cable landing stations that were struck from the bill. I imagine it was struck from the bill to take it out of the Hawaii Broadband and Digital Equity Office section. But I did note that in the bill, there's only 2 lines on page 12, section 15 with regard for fiber landings, and it's kind of not specific. So I'd like to request amendment be done to replace the original language back into the bill, but under the section for the authority, if the committee could consider that. Thanks. Thank you for the opportunity to testify and open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Hawaiian Telcom, Janine Suki. Offering comments. Sandy Wong.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair Clark, and members of the committee. My name is Sandy Wong. I would just echo the comments from Ocean Networks in regards to the trans-Pacific language. I think it should be clearer and put in the authority section for duties and powers. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have written comments from Daniel C. Smith. That's all the testifiers we have on House Bill 2397. Anyone else there wishing to testify? Seeing none, let's open it up to questions from members. Representative Capella. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Bellotti, please proceed.
Thank you. My question is for DCCA, please. And I acknowledge the testimony of BNF saying that this might be premature, but I cannot believe that we are the only state that is struggling with the question of what the regulatory framework is going to be around large infrastructure that is going to be funded by public funds. So Director Awakuni, do you have a team looking inside from DCCA's perspective and maybe in coordination with DBED as to what those regulatory structures might look like?
As it relates, thank you for the question, Representative. As it relates to the federal grants that are coming, the governor's office has asked the University of Hawaii to look at those particular grants and coordinate on behalf of the entire state. There are also some cybersecurity type grants that will be eligible for. So they'll be also working with HSEO on those kinds of grants. I think you're right in that this is not unique to Hawaii. A lot of other states have broadband offices established. Some of them do that through their public utilities commissions. Some do through separate broadband offices. Here in Hawaii, we do have DBED with its broadband strategy officer and the digital equity, bill that you moved last year or last session as well. With respect to DCCA, our touch with broadband is, some responsibility through the cable television division. The FCC has made very clear that cable television regulation cannot include broadband regulation. And so we're very careful to kind of walk that fine line, as I'm sure Spectrum will continue to remind all of us.
Okay, members, any other questions? Seeing none, I have a couple questions, starting with Charter Communications. Rebecca Lieberman, are you still on the call?
Yes, hello.
Yes, I have a question. In your testimony, you made reference to the fact, to your belief that there are aspects of the bill that require deeper review and may be problematic. Are you referring to, in your testimony, you say you would prefer a standalone entity. So are you saying that you would prefer a non-governmental authority to be in charge of establishing broadband access in Hawaii?
No, not necessarily. I think there just needs to be an additional conversation and additional review. And we would love to continue the conversation going forward, and we'll spend a little bit more time. We'll do some outreach and would love to talk to some of the folks on this committee about the bill. We just think it needs a little bit more thought.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate it. And I also have a question for DCCA, Director Kawakuni. You made reference to the fact that the department would need a significant commitment of personnel and funds. Do you have an estimated cost for this?
I don't, and I think that's part of the problem, is that we're not sure what grants we will be able to, because a lot of the grants will need to be competitively, I guess, bid for with the federal government. It's kind of hard to know what we will win and what monies exactly will come in. But based on what I'm seeing from the bill, it looks like there will need to be a number of different kinds of tasks, right? So that authority will need to have, few, if not several attorneys, few, if not several engineers, accountants, other sort of staff to support the authority, all of the sort of infrastructure. So it would be building an entire team to assist, and provide that sort of heft, to support those members, volunteer members.
Okay, but even if, as you said, we are applying for a grant at the federal level, you would still have to apply for or request a certain amount. So you want to take a ballpark guess and how much we would be needing to ask for?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask Garrett Yoshimi if he might have a better sort of ballpark estimate, because he's kind of been leading that process.
Garrett?
Thanks, Chair. Sorry for just popping in every once in a while, but this particular area, as Director Colon also mentioned, as well as some of the others on the conversation today, is in fact evolving as we speak. So one of the things that is part of the duties that we've taken on from a coordination role for the state is to also keep in conversation with our counterparts in the other states, because everybody else has to figure out this problem as well. It's not a problem that's unique to us. So the good thing is that there are a bunch of coordination efforts happening across the states, in particular led by the Department of Commerce, NTIA, as well as some of the other agencies that are responsible for granting these funds. And there's, like I said, a number of conversations going on, meetings that happen on both a biweekly as well as monthly basis for several of the folks representing all the different states that are going to receive these funds over the next, probably will receive funds over the next year plus. So
Jared,
this,
what I was trying to get at is a ballpark estimate of how much money we're talking about requiring in the state of Hawaii to
yeah, so
operate.
the bottom line is it's pretty tough to say, just because we don't know the nature of some of those investments. Obviously there is just some existing infrastructure at PUC as well as DCCA. So we would obviously want to take advantage of that, but yeah, it's tough to say what the actual numbers would be. I'd hate to venture a guess because the answer is I don't know.
Okay, you're saying planning first, staffing later. Okay.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, Representative Bellotti has a question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. This is actually for Garrett, Mr. Yoshimi. Just as a follow-up to this, I mean, I think we need to kind of be clear, because the question that I heard Chair Takayama asking was what would be the funds we would need for the regulatory structure once everything is built out. So it's very interesting what you're saying, that these conversations are happening with these think tanks and I imagine it's teams of people across states,
right,
intersecting with the federal partners. From your studies at this point up to now, is there a regulatory structure that is kind of emerging among the states? Because as the author of this bill, the authority is it's not fixed. We're building it as you guys are continuing to and really pushing on the federal funds for the actual infrastructure. So is there any insights you could provide this committee about what the regulatory structure is going to be looking like in other states?
Yeah, there haven't. So none of the states have actually put anything, or at least to my knowledge, none of the states have yet put any actions in place or even directions in place. The focus right now is to really look at the where the investments can go. And in the most part, I think they're looking at trying to align them with existing regulatory infrastructure. One of the issues, though, as you haven't and as you highlighted in the bill, one of the issues is how to craft the proper ownership and long-term oversight of the asset, because that is absolutely important, in particular for the sustainability assets that are going to be built. So that is something that folks are trying to figure out. And I haven't seen an explicit statement from any of the states yet as far as how they're gonna put that in place.
Thank you, Chair. And I thank you for letting us have this discussion, because I think what we're doing is we're getting ahead of the issue and the challenge, and that all the people on this hearing are actually highlighting how they're working together. So I do appreciate that effort. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Garrett.
Thank you. And thank all of you for testifying. Seeing no other questions, let's move on to House Bill 1885, proposing to establish a Chief Data Officer and Data Task Force within the State Office of Enterprise Technology Services. And first up, we have Douglas Murdoch from the Office of Enterprise Technology Services.
Aloha, we'll stand on our testimony in support of the bill.
Thank you. Let's see, we have the Hawaii Health Information Exchange, Francis Chan in support. Office of Information Practices in support. Department of Budget and Finance, Craig Hurai offering comments. Transform Hawaii Government, Christine Sakuda. Christine, please proceed.
Thank you. Aloha Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and members of the Committee on Higher Education and Technology. Transform Hawaii Government is in support of HB 1885 relating to government data. I'm Christine Sakuda, the Executive Director of Transform Hawaii Government, and we are a coalition of organizations and individuals who believe in improving government systems and business practices through technology, and ensuring that policymakers and state employees, residents, and businesses have access to current and reliable information. It's hard for the state to implement a data strategy and build up data infrastructure without dedicated resources such as a Chief Data Officer. So happy to answer any questions, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Christine. Let's see, we have the Civil Beat Law Center for the Public Interest, Brian Black in support. And we have Ryan Ozawa, an individual in support. So is there anyone else out there wishing to testify on House Bill 1885? Seeing none. Members, any questions? I do have a question for Mr. Murdoch. In your testimony, let's see, you offer additional clarification of the roles of the Chief Data Officer, but my question goes to how much you think it would cost us to fund this office in the future?
In order to get, highly qualified data officer, it probably will cost $130,000 to $140,000 for that position. They tend to be very specialized people, and then honestly, you should also have a data scientist on staff to do the very high level analysis of really big groups of data, and that's probably a $120,000 position.
So were we to suggest that this office be funded, we're talking about roughly $160,000 request?
Right. I think it's 260,000. Yeah, and then
That's not as strong. Okay.
Perhaps 130,000 in the first year.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions. Let's move on to the final bill on the agenda, which is House Bill 2051 relating to consumer privacy. And first up, we have comments from Department of Budget and Finance Director Craig Hirai. CTIA, Lisa McCabe, offering comments in opposition. Christian Rataj, NAMIC, in opposition. Allison Ueoka, Hawaii Insurance Council.
Good afternoon, Chair Takayama and Vice Chair Clark. Allison Ueoka for Hawaii Insurance Council. We'll stand on our testimony in opposition, asking for an exemption because the Insurance Data Security Act was just passed last year in Hawaii. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Matt Sujimura, representing State Farm Mutual Automobile Insurance Company, State Farm.
Aloha, Chair. Members of the committee, Matt Sujimura on behalf of State Farm Insurance. We'll also stand on our written testimony in opposition to HB 2051. And I'll just point out that we are also asking for similar language for an exclusion or exemptionary language for insurance companies who are subject to other language, other laws with regards to this this area. But happy to answer any questions at the end if you have any. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we have Wendy Hildebrand, Hawaiian Electric. Not present, but offering testimony in opposition. Hawaii Bankers Association, Neil Okabayashi.
Good afternoon, Chair Takayama and Vice Chair Clark and members of the committee. Neil Okabayashi for the Hawaii Bankers Association, testifying in opposition to this particular bill. I will basically stand on my testimony other than to note that banks and other financial institutions are subject to a great number of privacy laws already. And we are also subject to regulation by federal and state regulators who examine us for privacy issues. Thank you. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Dylan Hoffman, TechNet in, oh, there you are. Okay, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair Takayama, Vice Chair Clark, and members of the committee. My name is Dylan Hoffman, testifying on behalf of TechNet. Thanks for the opportunity to provide this testimony on HB 2051. I support my written testimony and just want to put a finer point on a couple of things. So passing a broad and expansive privacy measures such as HB 2051, which is modeled on California's privacy laws, without learning from that approach will impose significant compliance costs on local businesses. The California Department of Justice estimated that the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, would cost businesses $55 billion in initial compliance, with companies with fewer than 20 employees incurring an average of $50,000 in initial costs. Since the CCPA was passed in 2018, California has amended that statute 12 times and gone through 5 series of regulatory rulemakings. California voters also passed the CPRA in 2020 to replace the CCPA, and regulatory proceedings are expected to begin this year. So nearly 4 years later, and California is still working to correct a flawed approach. We strongly urge you not to move forward with HB 2051 and to work with stakeholders on the breadth of issues this bill is attempting to regulate. TechNet member companies place a high priority on consumer privacy, but moving forward with a broad privacy regulation will have a negative impact on business, consumers, and innovation in Hawaii. For these reasons, TechNet respectfully opposes HB 2051 and asks the committee not to move this bill forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We have the State Privacy and Security Coalition.
Thank you, Chair Takayama, for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Anton Van Semeter, and I am testifying as counsel of the State Privacy and Security Coalition. We recognize that this bill is well-intentioned, but with its current language, it would be detrimental to both consumers and businesses. It would create confusion for Hawaii residents and needlessly impose significant compliance costs due to outdated definitions and requirements that would not meaningfully advance consumer privacy. This is because many of its elements, honestly, are taken directly from the California Consumer Privacy Act, instead of looking to the updated language in Virginia and Colorado, which are 2 states that learned from many of the unintended consequences in California. First, the definitions mostly mirror the vague and overbroad language in California, which has led to significant confusion among the business community and consumer advocates in that state. These include the definitions of personal information, sell, and consent, whose treatment in California, far from granting consumers substantive rights, has simply led to widespread confusion. The bill also adds new, unnecessary, and confusing definitions to the California structure. Among others, these include the definitions of dark patterns, advertising and marketing, and commercial purpose, which are similarly duplicative with the bill's other definitions and primarily serve to muddy the waters here. Furthermore, the bill's enforcement provisions would create a moving target for compliance, similar to what we have seen in California. This would dramatically increase compliance costs with little corresponding privacy benefit to consumers, as businesses would be forced to continuously adapt to an ever-expanding set of rules and regulations. This moving target is particularly problematic for the highly technical and operational compliance requirements, such as the consumer opt-out signal in the bill. As written, it would lead to potentially conflicting signals between consumers who select the global opt-out and proceed to opt in on a local website, or simply wish to enable disclosure of personal information on that particular site without permitting this for others. These are not the only problems posed by the new and often vague requirements in the bill, but they provide sufficient reason why we strongly urge you to instead follow the privacy approaches we have seen recently enacted in Virginia and Colorado. Thank you so much again, and we of course would be happy to discuss any of these issues further if helpful.
Thank you. Hawaii Financial Services Association, Marvin Dang, offering comments. American Property Casualty Insurance Association, Annie Makapagal.
Aloha, Chair. Annie Makapagal on behalf of the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. We'll stand on our written testimony in opposition and echo the sentiments of the previous insurance industry testifiers requesting that the bill be amended to exempt the insurance agency, as we are already governed by stringent state and federal rules. Happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a written statement from Richie Engelhardt offering comments, and that's all I have. Anyone else on the Zoom wishing to testify on House Bill 2051? Seeing none, members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's recess for decision making. Committee on Higher Education and Technology will resume for decision making on our 2 p.m. agenda. First up, we have House Bill 1531, establishing a collective bargaining unit for grad assistants employed by the UH. Chairs recommendation will be to move this forward as is. Members, any comments, questions, or concerns? Representative Ganadin?
Chair, thank you so much. I just wanted to disclose to members of the committee as well as the public that I offered my services as an attorney to several unions who filed an amicus brief on behalf of the student union. I checked in with House attorneys, and because I have no stake in the matter, I'm not conflicted out, but just for disclosure purposes, I did file that brief about 6 months ago.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation of the chair is to pass Bill number HB 1531. Chair and Vice Chair votes aye. Representative Belatti.
Aye.
Representative Ganadin.
Aye.
Representative Gates.
Aye.
Representative Hashimoto.
Aye.
Representative Capella.
Aye.
Representative Ono.
Aye.
Representative Quinlan.
Aye.
Representative Woodson is excused. Representative Yamane.
Aye.
Representative Okimoto. Recommendation is adopted, Chair.
Thank you very much. The next bill up is House Bill 2015 relating to establishing a Criminal Legal System Institute at the UH Richardson Law School. Chair's recommendation is to move forward with several amendments. And first of all, I would like to thank the introducer of the bill for this far-reaching bill that I think will have will lead to improvements in our criminal justice system, which are long overdue. So first of all, if you're following on the bill, we would like to shorten the preamble by eliminating the first 4 pages, go to page 5, and starting on the 3rd line, begin the preamble with the legislature believes that the state must create an inclusive and fair criminal legal system. Continuing down to line 7, these ongoing, and here we make some changes. And so the sentence would read, these ongoing challenges include intergenerational poverty and trauma, comma, insufficient support services and inadequate housing, comma, and are reflected in their disparate levels of incarceration. Furthermore, on page 7 of the bill, in subsection 3, starting on line 6, among the responsibilities of the Institute, it would be to create a conduit for regular reporting and consultation with state, and add in county, comma, nonprofit organizations and private agencies. And furthermore, at the end, adding in, including the Criminal Justice Research Institute in the state judiciary, period. Furthermore, on that same page, lines 10 through 16, where the language defines the duties of the director and institute, would delete that because that's redundant to previous sections in the bill. Finally, we would add a effective date of July 1st, 2050. So members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Representative Vice Chair Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Noting the absence of Representative Woodson, are there any members voting no? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation.
Or with reservation.
Oh, sorry. You're with reservations, so thank you, Rep. Okimoto.
Okay, thank you. Next bill is House Bill 2186 relating to UH districts. We're going to defer this bill. This is the second year we've taken it up. I know there's been discussions with UH and other stakeholders at the county and among other state agencies, but I think there is still some more work to be done. So we're going to defer this bill. House Bill 2187 relating to staggered terms for the Board of Regents. Chair's recommendation is to move this forward with amendments, technical amendments, along with a defective date. Members, any questions, comments, or concerns? If not, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Noting the absence of Representative Woodson, are there any members voting no?
With reservations.
Are there any members voting with reservations? Seeing none, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. This next bill, House Bill 2397 relating to broadband. First of all, I'd like to thank the introducer of the bill, the Majority Leader Belatti. It's a far-reaching bill. Still, it has 2 more committees to go through. I think it's a terrific start on creating a broadband authority, enabling us to move forward. There are a couple amendments, and please bear with me. Beginning on page 7, section 2, where we talk about ex officio members. I'd like to add the Director of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, since the authority would be within that department, along with the Office of Digital Equity. Moving on to page 8, section 8, beginning on line 18, where it talks about remote participation by members. Going to adopt the recommendation of the Office of Information Practices, which says that since the task force falls under the Sunshine Law, it's not necessary to create special remote participation rules. So we're going to delete that section. Moving on to page 10, line 14, among the duties of the authority would be to acquire real or personal property, including rights, and add in the words of way or easement. Let's see, page 11. Oh, okay. On lines 6 and 7, we would combine those 2 duties of the authority to make them both prepare and plan projects and attendant facilities, along with improving and equipping them. And also add on the duty of including the promotion of the landing of trans-Pacific submarine cable with development of a shared access cable station and associated terrestrial connectivity to reduce barriers to fiber landing in Hawaii. In other words, taking from page 18, the duties of the Digital Equity Office and moving that to the authority. Let's see. Furthermore, on page 13 and 14, beginning on line 13, relating to the collection of data. This is the most apparently concerning issue among the internet providers. And so we're going to suggest adopting language suggested by OIP, which basically says that the authority would be allowed the collection of data, but providers may designate certain information confidential, and to the extent permitted by state law, the authority would keep such information confidential. Furthermore, we would add committee report language noting the concerns of wireless providers that the data collection proposed may duplicate or conflict with existing federal law. And we'll ask future committees to further consider this issue. Finally, we would add a defective date of July 1st, 2050. We'll leave the federal money request blank and let the finance deal with it. And that would be my suggested amendments. Members, any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair? Wake up.
Thank you, Chair. Noting the absence of Representative Woodson, are there any members voting no? Any reservations? Thank you, Rep. Okimoto. With all other members voting aye, the chair's recommendation is adopted.
Okay, House Bill 1885 relating to establishing a chief data officer and data task force. Chair's recommendation is to move forward with a few amendments. On page 2, line 15, adding the language suggested by ETS, which would be to require that the chief data officer shall research and recommend processes and tools to use the state information assets and analytics to improve interdepartmental and intradepartmental decision-making and reporting throughout the executive branch departments. We would, on page 4, where it refers to the establishment of a data task force and specifies members, lines 14 and 18, where it specifies that a member of the House of Representatives and a member of the Senate be appointed. We would delete that to delete the legislative membership. My feeling that because there's further provision for the Speaker and Senate President to appoint members of the public, that we would be adequately represented. Finally, we would make a defective date, add a defective date to the bill, and in the report language suggest that if committees are to further consider this measure, that they consider the amount of $130,000 in the first year, followed by $260,000 in subsequent years. So, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Noting the absence of Representative Woodson, are there any members voting no? Are there any members voting with reservations? With all members voting aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Recommendation is
Finally, we have House Bill 2051 relating to consumer privacy. Number of concerns clearly show that this bill needs further work and discussion, so I'm going to defer this bill. And so that concludes our hearing this afternoon. Thank you, members. Just one final announcement is that since we finished work on all of our triple referral bills, we'll have no hearing on Friday afternoon. Bridget.